Are you interested in finding out who all the Beatles dated? Hello everyone and welcome back to Yellow Submarine, your #1 dedicated Beatles channel. Today I'm going to show you the full list of every girl that the Beatles have ever dated. You're about to find out details about their relationships with these girls, including how long they were together, what caused them to break up, and more. The Beatles were an English rock band that probably became the most successful act of the 20th century, as we all know. The Beatles rocked the world of mainstream music in the 1960s and permanently changed it. George Harrison, John Lennon, Paul McCartney, and Ringo Starr were among the band's original members. They influenced popular culture and the lifestyles of multiple generations through their contributions to music, movies, literature, art, and fashion. Their songs and visuals, which convey powerful messages of love, peace, assistance, and imagination, elicited creativity and liberation that excelled old Soviet propaganda and helped to tear down barriers in the minds of millions, leaving an indelible mark on history. The Beatles are still one of the best-selling musical groups of all time, thanks to the production of 3 anthological collections in the mid-1990s. But in today's video, we'll be talking about all the girls the Beatles dated from 1958 till the present. Make sure you watch to the end to know about the women, wives, and girlfriends behind the Beatles and their love life. Before we continue, quickly subscribe to our channel and click the bell to be notified every time a new video is up. So let's go! We'll be starting with John Lennon. In 1957, John Lennon met Cynthia Powell, his future wife, in a calligraphy class at Liverpool College of Art. John Lennon would regularly bring his guitar into class, disguised as a teddy boy, to serenade the girls. He made sure he always complimented another girl in class, telling her she looked like Brigitte Bardot, which Cynthia Powell overheard, and she immediately coloured her hair blonder and immediately drew John's attention, who always referred to her as Miss Hoylake, after the affluent Liverpool neighbourhood where she grew up. They started dating in 1958, and Cyn visited the Beatles in Hamburg during one of their legendary stays, becoming pregnant around the same time. In 1962 they got married, with Brian Epstein, their manager, serving as best man. Julian, who we later know of Hey Jude fame, was born in 1963, right in the middle of Beatlemania. Cynthia was hidden from the screaming fans and treated badly by John Lennon as his star rose and the trappings of fame took over. After the disastrous retreat to Rishikesh in 1968, their marriage came to an end. After the marriage ended, John Lennon met Yoko Ono. Yoko Ono, a Japanese conceptual artist residing in New York, was a friend of Paul McCartney's who met John Lennon at an exhibition in London in 1966. The two met for the first time in November 1966 in a London gallery where Ono was preparing for a solo exhibition. They hit it off right away and embarked on a whirlwind and at times contentious romance. Yoko Ono was a continuous presence in the final years of the Beatles. Since then, there's been a lot of discussion over whether Ono was involved in the group's breakup. They married in Gibraltar in 1969 and held their famous week-long bed-in for peace in Amsterdam during their honeymoon. They wrote Give Peace a Chance during a second bed-in in Montreal, collaborating as the Plastic Ono Band. In 1970, the Beatles relocated to New York after their breakup. After a brief separation during which Lennon established a romance with personal assistant May Pang, called his Lost Weekend, 1973 to 1975, the two reconciled, and son Sean was born in 1975. John and Yoko were together until the very end, with Ono standing next to him when he was assassinated. Double Fantasy, their final album together before his murder, was released in 1980, barely 3 weeks before Lennon's assassination. Because Lennon had been on a 5-year professional break to care for the couple's son Sean, the record was met with rapt attention. Moving on to Sir Paul McCartney. Jane Ascher, an actress and TV presenter, first interviewed the Beatles at the Royal Albert Hall when she was 17 years old in 1963, and soon after, she began a relationship with famed lyricist and Beatles bass player Paul McCartney. He moved into the Aschers family's posh London townhouse quickly, and Red-Headed Jane was the idea for the love songs And I Love Her and We Can Work It Out. When Paul and Jane announced their engagement on Christmas Day 1967, they broke hearts all over the world. Jane Ascher travelled with Paul and the other Beatles partners on their historic trip to India, where things took a turn for the worse. Jane Ascher came home from work early one day in early 1968 to discover Paul in bed with a superfan, Francie Schwartz. This was too much for her, so she ended the relationship on the spot. Jane Ascher went on to have a successful career writing cookery and fancy dress books. Linda Eastman, a photographer for Rolling Stone magazine, met Paul McCartney at a party celebrating the release of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band in 1967 while on a photo assignment. When Paul McCartney first saw Linda Eastman in May 1967 at the Bag O' Nails nightclub in London's Soho Quarter, where he had his table, he was one of the Beatles' most eligible members. The blonde American rock photographer, who was there with several buddies from the rock band The Animals, approached Paul. She was in London on assignment for a book called Rock and Other Four-Letter Words, and she was shooting images for it via Ultimate Classic Rock. After his engagement to Ascher ended, Paul encountered Linda again in New York and invited her and her little daughter Heather to reside with him in London, and the rest is history. One of rock's music greatest love tales began with a chance meeting. The adorable Beatle and the tenacious young rock and roll photographer began a romance that ended in marriage just over a year later. Paul attributed the lovely Linda with helping him to get over the Beatles' breakup, dedicating the magnificent Maybe I'm Amazed to her when the couple married in 1979. Paul and Linda had 3 additional children, Mary, Stella and James, before fleeing to Scotland, where they became our foremost Fair Isle knitwear connoisseurs. Paul taught Linda to play the keyboard after being inspired by their surroundings, and the two went on to establish Wings, one of the most successful British bands of the 1970s. Linda McCartney was an animal rights activist who also became one of the country's most prominent vegetarians, a cause she championed until her untimely death in 1998. Let's now talk about Ringo Starr and his women. Ringo Starr dated Maureen Cox in 1963. Maureen Mo Cox, a hairdresser, was a regular at Liverpool's legendary Caving Club, where she had her first kiss with drummer Richard Starkey when she was just 15 years old. Cox was threatened by envious fans when she began dating Ringo Starr at the height of Beatlemania, and she had to abandon her work to stay with him. Her parents had to grant their permission for her to go on vacation to Greece with Ringo, Paul and his girlfriend Jane Ascher because she was still so young. Mo fell pregnant with her son, now Oasis musician Zack Starkey, and the pair married in 1965, having 2 more children, Jason and Lee. The Stars followed the Beatles on their trip to India, but theirs only lasted 10 days due to the food and insect complaints. Their marriage suffered as a result of the Beatles' breakup, and they divorced in 1973 when Maureen had an affair with George Harrison, the band's brother. In 1975, they divorced. Another notable woman connected to Ringo Starr was Barbara Bach. Barbara Bach, an international fashion model and actress, had a breakthrough role as Bond girl Anya Amasova opposite Roger Moore in 1979's The Spy Who Loved Me. Barbara, like Ringo, grew up in New York and modelled before pursuing a career in acting. Starr took his hand at acting while his other Beatles made solo albums, and sparks sparked when the two were casting Caveman, a cave-language slapstick farce. Their heady romance blossomed, and they married in 1981. During the 1980s, they led a jet-set lifestyle to excess until the couple hit the reset button and are now a picture of healthy living. Finally, to George Harrison, the last member of the band. George Harrison met Pattie Boyd in 1964. Pattie Boyd, along with famous British supermodel Twiggy and Jean Shrimpton, embodied the style of attitude of swinging London when modelling for Mary Quant and Ossie Clark in the 1960s. Boyd, who was 19 at the time, got into acting and was hired as a schoolgirl in the Beatles film A Hard Day's Night in 1964, rapidly forming a strong friendship with the guitarist. Pattie and George, a flower power couple, married in 1966, and she inspired him to write the wonderful song Something. The new Mrs. Harrison instantly embraced spirituality and accompanied the gang to India. However, after their return, she resumed modelling and her marriage to George began to disintegrate. She had an affair with Ronnie Wood in 1973, while George had an affair with the aforementioned Maureen Starkey. She left Harrison for his best friend Eric Clapton in 1974, whom she later married, and was the inspiration for his smash song Layla. Following the breakup of the band, George Harrison went solo and founded Dark Horse Records. Olivia Rice, a secretary for a record business in Hollywood, began working for Harrison solely after several long-distance phone talks with the former Beatle, and the spiritual couple soon fell in love. Olivia and George married a month after their son Danny was born in 1978, and they lived in the wonderful Friar Park in Henley-on-Thames, tending to its huge opulent gardens, well worth a Google and travelling the world. Olivia saved her husband's life when an attacker stormed into their home and attacked him in 1999, and they remained committed to each other until George died in 2001. Thank you for taking the time to watch, and we hope you enjoyed it. If you do, kindly like and subscribe so that you can receive more engaging and entertaining content in the future. Don't forget to turn on the notification. We hope to see you in the next video. Bye!